Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of Indie Zombie Quickies. I am Jordan. Today I'm talking about 3 little titles. And these are my first impressions after playing them for about an hour or two. Let's get started. First up is The 10th Line. I've had this one for a little while on my system and got around to playing it finally. Played about 2 hours of it, and these are my impressions of it so far. The very first hour did feel a little bit like a slog. Basically, it's a classic RPG in the sense of Superden or Indivisible Prototype, which was a game that came out a while ago as a demo and I really liked. And it plays in the same style of that, where Valkyrie Chronicle style, where you walk around on a plane, only it's slightly different, where when you encounter enemies in the field and also different treasures. But what's different about it in this playstyle is that you can control each individual character when you're just walking around in the environments. And different characters have different abilities that they can do on these planes. You have your main character, the princess, who's just kind of an all-around character, it seems. You have Tox, which is the dragon. And he's also, I guess, kind of your mage powerhouse, and is that he can also breathe fire, and you find out that with that ability, you can also change it in the overworld, which is kind of interesting, but doesn't really seem to play into the combat, though. Maybe it does later, I don't know. Is that he can burn through some of the Thicklethorn stuff in order to unlock paths, so you can walk through. And then you got your little fox guy, who I forget his name, unfortunately, and I apologize for that. And basically he's smaller and faster. And you use them in these primary semi-platforming levels in order to get to higher places, in order to get to treasures that you want to unlock and such. And then when you get into combat, this is where Superden or Indivisible Prototype kind of come in, where every character is mapped to a button. Princess is like X or square, the fox is such and such, and Tox, the dragon, I believe is triangle. And they have some different abilities that you can use that also have a limited use, it seems, and some of them have different strengths and then different special type of attacks, where some can go through lines of enemies, others can attack multiple, and so on. And this goes for each character. And when their attacks are kind of used up, they just can't do anything, which kind of sucks, but you can have them rest for 1 round. And same thing kind of happens too when the enemies attack, where you then press a button in order to have them defend and take less damage. And the very first hour of the game did feel a bit sluggish, because obviously it was, slowly introducing me to it, and I was just kind of getting into it a little bit. But my second hour, I was enjoying it a lot more. The story was starting to grow on me, where it then introduces this whole idea of there is this separation class between the humans and the beasts, with characters like Tox, who apparently is this dark dragon character. And dark dragons apparently have this stigma to them, where they are thought as basically evil. Because either there's a prophecy or there's this just stigma about them where they will just become evil because of the dark power that they have within them. Like we see that with one character who just immediately, sees Tox as a black dragon, despite the fact he's very well spoken, he's, pretty calm dude. He's also fairly antisocial, where he just doesn't really talk all that much. But he's a pretty nice guy, and obviously a pretty intelligent person, but obviously for other people who just don't know him, immediately just write him off as just an evil beast, pretty much. And then there's his younger brother, the fox, and turns out that he was adopted, which is kind of funny. And then the thing about the princess is that I don't really think that she has a name. I think she's just introduced as the princess, and she never really gives her name, other than the country that she came from, but she's very far away from that. the story is that she escaped this cult that wanted to sacrifice her, and she stumbles upon these two in the woods, and they offer to help her after she tells them that, oh, well, I come from a very rich family, and I'm sure that you will be handsomely rewarded for helping me. And they could certainly use some assistance with that instead of just, having to live as they do, just kind of scraping by and sleeping on other people's floors and having to do odd jobs and stuff like that. And eventually I met two other characters, and I think this is the max party, because these are all the characters that are on the cover of the game. And what's kind of interesting about that is that they tend to just hang in the back, and either you have to just wait for them to build up, because I guess they're kind of one-time uses in between rounds, where when you get them and they attack, they're very heavy hitters. So like one of them is this big burly brawler, and then the other one is this mysterious archer who wants to turn Tox in because he's a dark dragon beast, is kind of her storyline. And the brawler you meet after you leave this town and you're being hunted down by the cultists who are still chasing you, and he just happens to have run-ins, or have had run-ins with them, and just wants to beat the shit out of them because he knows them and he hates them, and basically offers to help you. And so how that works for combat is that if you want to use them, you have to then use the triggers, and what they'll do when they jump into attack is they'll just slaughter the first line of guys. And usually when you're in combat, you'll have quite a lot of enemies to them, where they're usually in 3 lines, and then there will sometimes be multiple guys behind them. Just sometimes depends, really. And what's also kind of interesting is how the leveling system works, where it's grid based, but how it works is depending on the number of upgrade points that you have, but also depending on the amount of items that you have, because you'll put a specific item into a specific spot, and the grid can follow along a particular path. And this is something I didn't notice when I was first playing. You actually kind of have to pay attention to what you put in the grid, because depending on the item that you use, it will then lead your grid along in a different direction. So not only does it help kind of what you put in, but it helps what you pay attention to as well. So if you want to keep leading your grid along a particular way, meaning to unlock a new ability at some point, which when you do that, it'll then unlock multiple paths for you to just go along in your grid and just unlock various other different abilities, or be able to upgrade yourself in various different ways. That does kind of make it limiting, but what is nice is that you can go back at any time and change it. But I don't know how that would affect the grid. It would certainly affect it differently, that's for sure. I would like to play more of this, but RPGs take quite a while to actually play through. I was at least enjoying myself. So there is that, and the story was certainly growing on me quite a bit more along with the characters. And I certainly enjoyed the combat system. I thought the leveling system was very interesting. So yeah, I give this a high recommendation. Alright, next up, Tooth and Tail. This is a real-time semi-strategy game, kind of in the vein of Warcraft. Kind of. Where the story is certainly different, where it's a faction of different animals, and I forget exactly how many different factions that there are, but you don't get to really choose who you play as. I was just playing as the Longcoats as the game started, and I played it for about an hour, and I was liking it to a point, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So the storyline of the game is that you were farmers, but you didn't really enjoy that, so you decided that you wanted to eat meat, and that's what started this whole war between all these different factions, which kind of doesn't make sense. And what also really just doesn't make sense is, well, while some animals already do eat meat, why would, all animals just choose to want to eat meat? Because that means that you're eating each other, basically. Which is kind of funny to think about. Anyway, but what was kind of interesting was at one point, as I was playing it, the game also, in terms of its storyline, is that it starts introducing kind of a class system, where particular animals are obviously on top, and pigs, or swine as they're referred to, are basically slaves. Where at one point, when you're in your sort of base, as it is, when you're in between missions, and you go into this room and you're talking to the various different animals and stuff like that, and some of them will give you missions, and you can replay them if you want to, I guess, to kind of figure out basically how the game plays. And you go into this one room and you're talking to these pigs, and it's pointed out very quickly that the pigs are slaves, because they're not allowed to learn how to read at all, and they are given designated numbers as well, which is like, wow, game, you suddenly got kind of deep on this. So, so that aspect of it was certainly interesting. And so how the game works is that, you have, your one main character, which is how you lead all of your troops around, and you have a farm that you will then build crops around, but only in designated areas around this mill, and you wait and you gain points, and then you can build either gun turrets to defend your area, and then you build different warrens for different soldier types. There are the little minion squirrel things, which is what I think they are, and then you got your bombers, and then you got your flamethrowers, which are kind of the powerhouse guys, kind of. And basically what you're doing is that when you get into these battle sequences, you're supposed to go around and basically destroy the enemy, and when you defeat or destroy a different base of theirs, you can take it over and build up more farms for yourself in order to give yourself a lot more energy so you can build more troops and go along from there. And that's pretty fun, but what starts to get kind of annoying is that if you're not focusing on attacking, if you're just only trying to defend at one point, which is what I was trying to do, because at one point I just ran out of troops and was just waiting for my stuff to rebuild and trying to defend my farm. That didn't work, because all of a sudden I just got overwhelmed. And it became really tedious at one point too, which is usually how these real-time strategy games tend to get for me at one point. They just start to get really tedious. When all of a sudden you just run out of resources, and you're just having to wait on stuff to slowly rebuild so that you can start trying to build up your army. I also don't really like the idea that you don't have individual control over your different troops, like in Warcraft, where you could kind of multitask and do that pretty quickly. You can't do that in here because you have your one guy on the ground that you have to go from farm to farm in order to do that. You can rally all your troops to you and tell them, like from where you are, stay here and I'll go ahead and scout, and stuff like that. But your main character can't attack or anything like that. He can only order his own soldiers to move to where he is and attack, or to move away and such, but that's about it. Of course, you can build turrets and stuff like that, so I guess there is that strategy, but that's only if you have enough energy to be able to do it, and I suppose you probably would, but yeah. I was liking it, but the tedium of it really started to wear on me, and I just stopped having fun, is kind of my core issue about it. I like the art style for it, certainly. I thought the storyline was pretty interesting. If you like real-time strategies, definitely check it out. Alright, moving on. Next and last, Saturday Morning RPG. I was hoping this would be a tad more interesting. I played it for about an hour, which is about how long the first episode takes, apparently. And what I didn't realize was that this game is kind of episodic, where everything is just kind of split up into episodes. Thankfully, you don't have to buy them individually or anything like that, thank God. I just don't like the idea, apparently, that the game is just kind of separated, where, well, and I guess that was kind of the idea, where it plays out, you know, like it's a TV show. But yeah, as I got more into it, and the story is that it takes place in this guy Martys Dreams, and in case you're wondering, yeah, it apparently is supposed to be Marty McFly from Back to the Future. This game is very reference heavy, which got kind of annoying on me. For one joke specifically, a joke we've all a reference, really, that we've heard a million times. You're introduced pretty quickly to a character called the Wizard, who is kind of your guide, and he gives you this notebook which has these special powers, kind of activates you, kind of acts as your inventory. But before you go into combat, the game wants you to use the touchpad on here to scratch at these various different stickers that give you different abilities or added abilities for combat, and usually it's the same thing. Give you plus strength, plus accuracy, speed, and hit percentage against enemies or something like that, and it's usually the same thing. So that felt kind of pointless. What's kind of interesting are the different special items that you get, various different ones too that you find in the game, either just randomly finding them or buying them out of a candy machine. It's kind of funny, but not really, because a lot of the jokes kind of fell flat for me. A lot of the references, I mean, I got them, but I didn't think they were particularly funny. The joke in the reference, because it's not really a joke, it's just a reference. So the Wizard is wearing the Power Glove, because of course he is. And after you first meet him and he flies off, of course he says, "I love the Power Glove. It's so bad." But I think they changed it, because I think instead they said something instead of, but it probably was just the same stupid joke. And the game is pretty stereotypical RPG. You have a boost ability which uses up mana. There are 3 different types of boosting. One where you just mash the button several times, and depending on how quickly and how much you mash, it'll up your multiplier, which will make your attacks stronger, but only for 1 round. I don't think it affects your defense. It feels like it does, but I don't know. And then you have your different abilities. You have a standard attack. Everything is kind of gauge-based. Mostly everything else is usually a multi-tap or something that is just non-interactive. And they're all very reference-heavy. One that I thought would be pretty funny was the Transformer bot that you pick up at one point. But yeah, because it's supposed to be a multi-hit attack, but it doesn't really feel like that. And this is going to sound nitpicky, but I don't like the fact that they don't use, you know, the transforming sound effect. I can understand why they didn't, because they probably couldn't afford it. But you could have at least have attempted a sound effect or something like that, but they didn't really even seem to try. And I mean, the game is certainly colorful, but it lacks sound in certain places. It lacks music. It lacks a little bit of depth to it too, which probably might have made it a tad more interesting. When you level up, you just get, oh, do you want to put more points into your strength or your hit points? And sometimes it's just random. Strength or speed. I don't even think hit points was an option at one point, but yeah, at certain points when you level up, it's like choose one and you get 2 options, and then that's it. But yeah, I played it for about an hour and I just wasn't impressed. So yeah, Not really sure I can give it a recommendation. And yeah, I just kind of quit after that. Hold on. Alright, so those were those 3 titles. Out of all of them, I could give the first 2 games a recommendation, The 10th Line and Tooth and Tail. While Tooth and Tail, I stopped having fun with it, I could certainly recommend it, at least for anybody that is certainly into real-time strategies. 10th Line, I was really liking and really enjoying. Saturday Morning RPG really didn't grab me all that much at all, sadly. It probably could have if it had maybe changed or done something a tad different. I imagine, for one thing, if all the sprites were either 8-bit or 16-bit, and maybe that's what they were going for, but it just really doesn't look like that. And if maybe there was a tad more color, maybe if the combat was a tad more interesting, I don't know. But, you know, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I really appreciate it. Support my channel, support me on Patreon, follow me on Twitter. Links are always in the description down below. Cover art is by my friend QuickKick, and I will see you guys next time. Take care of yourselves.